Welcome to the NEPA Scene Podcast, the only local live streaming podcast of its kind. We're coming to you from the brand new Legacy Studios in downtown Wilkes-Barre. I'm Rich Howells, the founder and editor of NEPA Scene. And today we're here with instrumental and touring guitarist Justin Mazer, originally from Shavertown, before his headlining show at the River Street Jazz Cafe in Plains on Saturday, February 18th. We're talking about how he became the guitarist he is today, his new EP, Artificial Spite, writing and recording instrumental rock, what goes into a great riff, his guitar of choice, great tour stories and tour survival tips, playing with everyone from Grahame Lesh to Bob Weir, his favorite NEPA musicians to collaborate with, his upcoming Jazz Cafe show, the Philadelphia music scene, and much, much more. So please stay tuned for the full hour. We would love to hear from you guys down below in the comments. Our friend and photographer Jason is behind the board tonight, so if there's any technical issues, you can yell at him in the comments below. He's happy to take your hate, no problem at all. But let us know if the audio's good and all that kind of thing. John Fry checked it before he left, but you know how these things go. So thank you for tuning in tonight to our broadcast. Before we dive in, I just want to thank Josh Balls for letting us use his recording studio. You might know him for his music or as the owner of the Strange and Unusual Oddities Parlor in Kingston, as well as Noir Dark Spirits in Scranton. His latest venture is Legacy Studios, and that's where we're recording from tonight, and we're always grateful to be here. Special thanks to our sponsor, merchbooth.com. I'll put my little merch booth guy up on the screen here. There we go. For providing the audio and video equipment that powers the NEPA Scene Podcast. Merch Booth helps entertainers, podcasters, and influencers create and sell merch online. If you already have designs, you can get started right away for free. However, if you prefer to have Merch Booth create some kick-ass designs along with $1,000 in annual benefits, you can become a Merch Booth VIP member for only $19.99 per month. Learn more and sign up at merchbooth.com. And look out for some new merch pretty soon from NEPA Scene. Finally, after 8 years, decided to make open mic shirts. So those are coming real soon. All right. So good to see you, Justin. It's been a long time. I think it was like 5 years since our last podcast.
That sounds correct. And thanks again for having me.
Absolutely. So what was your first exposure to the guitar? When was the first time you heard music that maybe really spoke to you in some way?
Getting right into it. Mm-hmm. That's an easy one. And probably most folks from Wilkes-Barre will appreciate this answer, which is Rock 107.
There you go. And what did you first hear?
Well, when my parents would give me a ride to school in the morning, I'd hear the same 3 Led Zeppelin songs and Free Fallin'.
And they're still playing that exact same.
Yep.
I don't think the playlist has changed whatsoever in all that time.
And I think on one of the days they decided to switch it up and play a Jimi Hendrix song. And I'm like, all right, what's going on with all this stuff? I gotta figure this out. So, but honestly, yes, it was listening to the radio, listening to music around the house. Probably around the age of 10, I felt extremely compelled to pick up a guitar or obtain a guitar. And, my family didn't have a ton of money growing up. So I remember I had to make a very large case to be like, this is something that I really, really want.
Right.
And, I got it, and I didn't have a lot of success with it for the first couple of years because I just had it. I didn't even think to tune it or anything. And then around the age of 12, a couple other friends of mine played guitar, and we started getting together and figuring things out, figured out how to tune it, pick a couple of chords, and away we went.
What was your first band? Did you have did you play on your own at first, or did you join a band, or how did that?
Taking it all the way back to, I guess it would be middle school. I played in a band called, what was it called? the Social Butterflies.
Oh, okay.
A few people will remember that.
That's a pretty good name, though.
And we had one rehearsal. We tried to play Last Night by the Strokes, and then I think I got ultimately kicked out for creative differences. I was a little too classic rock leaning, and those guys wanted to do more modern stuff.
Okay.
But then from there, around the age 15 or 16, I started playing a little more seriously with my high school friends, and we had Stealing from a Thief, which was very challenging instrument configuration of drums, 2 guitars, we didn't have a bassist. And then we're did a couple of talent shows and Battle of the Bands, and we realized this simply isn't working. We have to get more people, and then ultimately formed Dirty Water, which was the first band that I performed in this area with.
Okay.
We were playing virtually every weekend in bars by the time I was 16 or 17. So in high school, most weekends I spent playing at bars. Used to play at Outsiders a lot and other questionable places. Liam's Place in Wilkes-Barre rings a bell. Used to play there quite a bit. We were like 16, 17 years old, and we were just excited to play and make a little money.
Sure.
And that definitely was a huge source of excitement for us at that age.
Yeah. So did you know then that you wanted to kind of take it more seriously, or did you kind of treat it as, something fun to do with your friends?
I always knew I wanted to play as much as possible and improve as much as I can, and basically just set a sight on some kind of goal that I could work towards, whether it would be, being able to get a spot at this Battle of the Bands, or if this place would book us, or if we could open up for this group, so on and so forth. And but it wasn't really until, I guess it would be my early 20s, or right around the age of 19 or 20, when I was very hectic time in my life. I was going to school to be a history teacher. I was coaching track and cross country at my old high school. I was working multiple jobs and playing shows, doing a pretty good job at all of these things. And I ultimately I had an opportunity to start playing with a more regional touring band around that time. And I knew if I made that decision that I'd have to leave a few of these other things by the wayside. And it was a very conscious decision. And that, I think, was around age 21 when I was like, I got to drop a few of these things and I got to see this through for a bit. Even the opportunity to go on tour once, that was a goal at one point. I'm just like, I just want to know what getting in a van and going on tour is.
Right.
10 years later, I definitely know what that's about. And yeah, it was right around age 21 that I made it more of a priority in my life, and essentially spent, I'm 33 now, but my entire 20s just devoting my life to, literally devoting my life to just becoming as good as I could be, and taking every opportunity, being an absolute yes man for a while, taking every single gig, whether it was good or bad, ugly, 3-hour drive, 5-hour drive. And I just wanted to stay active and keep doing things. And those earlier formative years was how I really got my guitar playing chops up, because I was trying to play in as many different groups with as many different people as possible, put myself in uncomfortable musical scenarios where I would learn or absorb the different languages, whether it was a rock band or a country band, or played in a hip hop band for a little while, funk band, more of a post rock band. And it was those years in my early 20s where I really had such a vast and wide range of experiences playing all these different kinds of music that ultimately I ended up later, years later now, I'm very thankful for that, because other folks that perhaps have an opportunity to workshop a lot of stuff when they're younger, or perhaps those that attend music school that have time to really spend extended time practicing. I was more so by the necessity of just playing with this band. They need to fill in for somebody. You got to learn these 30 songs in like a week or two. And that's how I kind of honed in on that skill set early on.
What do you think and this, purely your, opinion and perspective, what do you think goes into being a good guitarist? What do you think it takes? Like, how many hours of practice or how many gigs? Like, what is it? What do you think it is to be a good guitarist?
I'll actually generalize your question and just what does it take to be a good musician, perhaps?
Sure.
And on the most general surface level, I just try to show up on time and be as normal as possible. That's literally it. If you could show up on time and learn material and just don't be too weird,
right,
you'll have some degree of success.
Because there are so many weirdos.
You'd be surprised, as you get into the journey of touring and playing with different bands, just how important all three of those things are. And you take for granted those things when they're not there. But as far as actual guitar practicing, it was around my mid-20s where I got into a more regimented routine. And particularly when I relocated to Philly, I don't even know how many, 5 years ago. And I had some roommates living by myself. And that was when I really kicked it into high gear in my late 20s, as far as just building. Because right around age 25, I stopped. I worked every side job under the sun. And that once I got to the point where I could get away with not having to do that. I'm like, I have this free time. And part of doing this is just riding that very thin balance of making enough money to survive, but also like devoting, like I said, essentially your entire life to your craft. So through that period, the last 5-6 years or so, I was probably practicing 6 to 8 hours every single day.
Wow.
And I stuck to that no matter what. And all of that was really just building basically a curriculum of sorts of things that I was interested in or wanted to work on. Could be a combination of a bunch of things, learning material, whatever, but that was my magic number. And I just kind of stuck to that. And I'm like, as long as I can do that for at least the 5 days a week that I'm home, I know that counts for something.
So what to you is like the dream gig, or like the gig that you want to do on a regular basis, the thing that, you wake up and you're like, I can't wait to get there to do this?
It's funny because I bounce, as you could probably see from my social media presence, I bounce around quite a bit. Kind of a lone wolf of sorts, but I have my hand in a lot of different projects, locally, regionally, in some cases nationally. And thankfully there's always something, especially at this point of doing it, because again, I'm about 12, 13 years in on this journey. And lately I've been telling people it kind of feels like every year I do this is like it's another season of a sitcom where I don't know if the network's going to pick me up for another season, but then something comes up and I'm like a tour in 6 months or something where I'm like, I have this as my grounding thing to look forward to get ready for. And there's always something on the horizon and it's always different. And my vision of, I don't know if I have an answer as far as like what my ideal gig is or musical scenario, but I think as I get older, I don't know. I never really had like a full-time home as far as a musical home. And perhaps in the future, I could find one or have something that I do on a more full-time basis. But part of what I enjoy so much about at least how my system works as far as making a living doing this is I get to play a lot of different stuff with a lot of different people. So that's kind of the trade-off for the chaos and the randomness of scheduling and trying to balance certain offers and things that come in. And of course, trying to do things that I want to do. And thus far, I thankfully, especially in the last 5 years, I think I'm just trying to survive, which is hard enough for anybody, let alone playing guitar for a living.
Right.
Trying to survive and essentially just trying to do things that I want on my own terms, at my own speed. And if I really wanted to make a lot of money playing music, I play in a wedding band, and there's nothing wrong with that.
Sure.
But if you want to make the most amount of money playing music, that's probably the avenue as far as like the most headache-free way to perform I'm far from that as far as the organization of all of it. But I think a part of it for me is, again, just being able to do things that I want to do at my own speed, on my own terms. And thankfully, the universe has allowed me to do that so far. But I don't expect that to be something that, I don't take that for granted. And
Right.
like I said, with the sitcom analogy, that could go away at any moment. So,
Right.
and then to take it all the way back, again, I just keep trying to show up on time and be normal.
I think those are some words of advice right there. That's the pull quote from that. Well, you know, it's what I like about what I do too is the flexibility of it and meeting new people and you know, creating with different people too. You know, like what we're doing right now is, you know, creating a you know, podcast, a conversation, whatever that people can tune into. And there's so much behind that. I don't know if the people really understand that or that they recognize it all the time, but it's one of those things where it's very hard to go back to a normal job, a 9 to 5, that sort of thing, when you have that kind of freedom. You know, like as difficult as it can be some days, like financially and a little, you know, of like, where am I going to be and how am I going to do this and logistics of it, that, you know, like you said, the trade-off there is like, you know, you get to be creative and do something fulfilling, you know, as opposed to, you know, working for the man or working for a boss that maybe doesn't respect you, you don't respect them, you know, like that's that sort of aspect. I don't know if I could go back to that at this point. Like that's tough, you know?
I think as far as that goes is, so I think about it sometimes, I'm not afraid to, at any point, if things came down to it, to do something besides music for income.
Right.
But so much of it, the musical journey is just like manifesting what you want in your mind and then trying to put yourself in the scenarios and positions of achieving it. And when things slow down for periods of the year, I always wrestle with, I got to do something, or if I'm not out constantly playing, does that make me less of a player or a musician?
Right.
But then I'm reminded, like, if I don't leave some of that time open just to live life and see your loved ones and friends and family, I have to leave that time open, because big line, quote, Brian Langan, gigs pop up. And the best opportunities I've had are things that come out of nowhere.
Right.
That I'm thinking about this. I want to try to get this gig. I want to try to play with this person. I want to try to play at this place. And then boom, out of left field, someone's like, hey, can you come do this tour or whatever? And that's just seemingly how it always goes. So the energy you put out in your mind, I feel like, comes back, but not always how you anticipate it.
Right. Exactly. So, let's get into, like, when did you create your first original song, and you know, how did that feel to get that out there?
Yeah. Well, over my formative years in my early 20s, I did play in bands where I did some of the writing, but it was always a partial or larger collaborative idea. But it really wasn't until the pandemic where I went all in on writing and releasing my own music under my own name. Because I definitely wrote songs, different variety of songs before that. But I feel like the real turning point for me, as far as, you know, trying to tackle some creative endeavors, was during the 2020 pandemic, when I really had some time to stay home and just explore these ideas I've had for a while. And because I've always had these concepts for things, and I've always really loved writing instrumental music. So many people ask me, or perhaps people don't quite understand, like, why don't you add lyrics to this song, or why don't you write songs with words? And for no other explanation than that, it's not how my brain works. I can't express myself through singing words about my life or life in general.
Right.
You know, I kind of am able to express myself through instrumental music and little, you know, not to to burst anyone's bubble, but most of the music in the world today across the entire earth is instrumental music.
Right.
So it might appear to be a fringe thing in certain corners, certain music communities, but across the whole world, it's actually quite common. And for anybody that's trying to do something creative and express themselves through that way, there is a place for it. And but again, circle back to your question. I didn't really hit the creative groove, I think, until 2020, when I started to have the time to invest fully into creating some of the things I've released in the last few years.
So you came right out of the gate with like 2 full albums right away. Like those were kind of your debut. You know, what made you want to put it out in that format to release 2 at the same time like that?
Well, first and foremost, just trying to challenge myself, do something different, do something that's a little bit maybe above and beyond what's necessary. But I had an album that was just about ready to release right when the pandemic hit, and I decided to kind of call that off. And then I started reworking some of that stuff while writing new stuff. And then before I knew it, I had a batch of maybe 30 songs, different varieties because I released 3 albums in 2021, and I wanted to release all 3 at once. I wanted to do 3 debut albums at once, but that wasn't quite possible. So I settled on 2, but it was just, part of it too is just to perhaps get the attention of more folks. I just think it was a cool entrance to, hey, here I am. And in addition to, I pride myself in fulfilling the role of, being a guitarist in someone else's band and playing other people's songs. It's a role I love to do. And it's something that requires a whole other part of my brain.
Right.
But to be like, hey, I also write my own music. I don't really know what it is yet, or I don't have a full grasp, and maybe I never will, of what I'm trying to overall convey. But here's 2 very different albums, and here's another one shortly thereafter. So that was a calculated decision, but it was, again, I just kind of wanted to have a more grand entrance, I guess, into, hey, here I am. Here's a bunch of my stuff.
So that's what I mean. It definitely, I think it grabbed a few headlines locally and stuff too on our site as well. Because I mean, that's just an interesting way to put it out there. What was the reception like once you those were out there for a little bit?
Definitely scary. Definitely, it's always scary to put yourself out there in any fashion. I'm feeling that as I approach these shows that we'll talk about soon. But it was ultimately very well received, and I feel like as far as things that I want to create, I want to try to really keep to the mission statement or idea of, again, doing things that on my terms, at my speed, that just seems appropriate, and not being bound down to any specific type of music or genre or anything. I'm still trying to figure out, my musical identity, aside from just the different techniques and musical vocabularies that go along with, playing in different bands. It's a whole different part of my brain that is like, for as long as I've been doing this, it's so new to me. Which again extends to the shows and just being I don't even want to say that, being a band leader, but just performing my own music. It's
right.
It's a totally new feeling that I'm definitely reckoning with, in a positive way, of course. And it's so awesome that after all the years of doing this, that there's still, music is still going to keep you on your toes, and it's gonna present you with some surprises.
Right. Yeah, it's so you have a single that you put out last month and a new EP that people can listen to now. The song was Sensitivity to Light, was released in January. Can you tell us a little about that?
Yeah, that was actually January 20.
Oh, was it 22?
Yeah.
Okay.
That was honestly just a leftover song from 2020, that at 2021, that I didn't really blend in with didn't really fit in any of the albums. Wow. And I didn't really fit anything I saw on the horizon. And I had intentions of releasing more music last year, but I had quite a bit of touring, and it definitely slowed me down on that front. But that was just a standalone song that I call it, it's my 80s sitcom song, 80s sitcom theme song. And it was just more of a standalone piece that was, the title of it was just inspired by a new development for me, something called migraines. Didn't really get those until recently in my life. And so that was where the title was inspired from. And just the song kind of has this bouncy, very happy, positive melody. And it's like a very pleasant song, which is, I'm always trying to have some contrast between the last thing I released and the next thing I released, whether that's intentional or not. So the thing I released before that was this 30-minute prog heavy metal, the Dream Killer suite. So I'm like, let me deliver something a little more refined in the form of a concise 3-minute, kind of like surfy rock 80s theme song. But the new EP, I could talk about that for a second. The new EP is a batch of 5 songs that essentially took me all of last year to complete. Without much rhyme or reason, and it kind of just explores what I call like higher octane musical ideas. I was just really into writing heavier riffs and weird time signatures. And one of the biggest things I learned from my prior albums is I wanted this one to be on the leaner side. I got a little carried away in certain instances on earlier releases, I think, with just stacking, making essentially guitar orchestra albums, which layers upon layers. And I'm just like, for this album, drums, bass, one guitar pan hard left and hard right, and make everything that you're hearing count and make it super lean and just super raw. And, I think I successfully achieved that. And I'm really proud of these songs. I was just talking to someone earlier. It's kind of at the ceiling level. I don't really have a lot more headroom as far as like, well, this little side note on everything is playing music. I love to play everything. I love to play all genres and types, and I love all roles that I hold within different bands. But on top of all that, in the most primal sense, like, I love to just play heavy rock music. And this whole EP is basically how fast and how many weird time signatures and how fast and how heavy and just thick can I make something. And I'm running with minimal headroom as far as this speed and kind of technicality aspect. And I have to shout out to the 2 drummers that played on it, because I put all this stuff together and I demo it and I send it to them to record on, and they're like, the BPM is 190 on this. Are you sure that I'm? And then I realized that's a lot to ask any drummer to play, that fast in 7 or something, some weird time signature. So they really brought the songs to life. And whenever they send me the stuff back, the drums back, and I listen to it, I would just laugh. Like, it's so awesome. So I wouldn't have been able to complete it without those guys. It's David Butler and Pat Berkery, who actually played drums on the War on Drugs song that was just nominated for Best Rock Song.
Oh, wow.
Grahame. So, he's a buddy of mine from Philadelphia, and I'm very lucky that guys of that caliber agreed to record on my weird instrumental rock songs.
How did that come together exactly? Did you just call them up and say, hey, I got this thing, and hope you guys are interested, or how did you choose the musicians that you ended up working with on this?
Well, I played everything except the drums, and both Dave and Pat are friends of mine, and I've had them record on other songs of mine in the past. So pretty simple, just, hey, I have a song or two I'd love to have you record on, and I kind of have to map everything out, because the drums are very specific on everything I've recorded, and they're a huge part of it. And I like to write songs that could even showcase the drumming a little bit, or have the drumming serve as a lead instrument in certain ways, as far as the drums are the one driving the bus. And they are incredibly skillful and tasteful and thoughtful as far as what they come back with. And one of the reasons that I'm able to even crank out some of this stuff as quickly as I can is because of guys like that who are able to just very efficiently just send me back a thing and I plug it in, and then I could do the rest of the work, at home. Or I had a great studio in Philadelphia that I did a lot of the tracking at as well. And the last year or two, I developed a really good system. I mean, you want to hope that if you're making albums that you get a little better at it, a little more efficient at it the next time around. So it's less of a I don't want to say a daunting task, but I mean, I learned so much in a short period of time as far as like what is needed and what isn't needed to make an album or an EP.
Right. So you feel like you're going to be maybe putting stuff out at like a faster pace as things go?
Whenever I'm not touring, I'm pretty much always setting my sights on completing a project. And that's something that keeps me going. That's something that, because I tell folks this all the time, I don't really have a lot of control over who calls me to go on tour. I'm ready to go on tour all the time. And I love touring and I love that side of things, but I know if things slow down for a little bit, I always have a project that I am trying to complete and work on. And that's kind of the cycle of this whole journey for me, is just tapping into that more. And it's a very conscious goal of mine. By the time I'm 40, I'd love to have a large body of work that's vast in whatever it is, and not be bound down by any specific genre. And part of what fuels the creative process for me as far as my own stuff goes is if I suspect in my mind that anybody that is a regular listener or fan of me maybe has me figured out in one way or thinks that I'm a certain typecast of a player, okay, I'll go as far in the opposite direction as possible on purpose to be like, if someone suspects that I'm just a Telecaster country guitar player, here's 5 heavy metal progressive rock songs.
Right.
That has nothing to do with that. And then I'm ready to kind of move into a different direction now as far as maybe it's time to make a surf rock album or something like that. And all that's on the table at all times. But it's definitely just, I'm trying to one up myself, through just, if I'm going to take an idea, take it as far in that direction as possible, and then put it to rest in your mind. And then, okay, what's next? Make an acoustic album, whatever, and just keep trying different things out.
Well, this EP is particularly very riff centered and riff heavy. So what, in your opinion, maybe makes a good riff? And how do you go about creating one? Because I know that's especially when people talk who maybe aren't necessarily super into the composition of music. It's very hard to create like an iconic riff that maybe hasn't been done before. It doesn't sound too close to something else that everybody knows or that's out there, whether consciously or subconsciously.
Sure. Well, I know for my stuff, I've kind of honed in on a process of, at least for this last batch of songs, where one of my moves that I might go to is I like to write in weird or odd time signatures. And then I like to try to come up with a melody or a riff that is not in a weird time signature to kind of superimpose a regular groove or feel of something that is more digestible to a listener, that if you almost have to listen very closely to hear that it's actually not in 4/4.
Okay.
And the way I do that is I try to come up with an arrangement or a chord progression or a groove, and essentially just workshopping and improvising. And, the best things are often that you come up with spontaneously. And with a lot of the stuff that I've released in the last couple of years, they are happy accidents that I would just demo, late at night when I'm trying different things out. And then I'm like, I try so hard, I can't even recreate what I did. And I didn't even mean to do that. So that just has to be what's on the thing. So I guess the short answer would be, perhaps for me, the best riffs occur by accident.
Okay.
I'm like, oh, there it is. But I think in general, you want that stuff to carry the weight of the song. And all my favorite riffs from rock bands and stuff like that, it's something that grabs you. It's something that has to have power and emotion and meaning behind it. And it's got a groove, all very general things. But I mean, best talking about the iconic riffs. I mean, Smoke on the Water, Kashmir, Iron Man, most Black Sabbath songs.
Certainly not over complicated, really.
No.
It's just that little hook that gets into your brain.
Simplicity, I think, is perhaps the biggest word of all of it. The best stuff is the simplest stuff, and things that have space. Like I think I found a good balance on this last EP, but sometimes when I'm playing live, it's sometimes when you're playing live and you stop playing for a second, there's a part of your brain that's like, what are you doing? Like, what are you doing? You need to be playing every second of you're on stage. And then when you listen back, when you take a rest and you let something breathe, you go back and you're like, oh, that was the best thing I did all night. And every time I'm like, I always could play less, and there's less that could. So it's when you create that space, everything that you play, I feel like, has a little bit more purpose and carries a little more weight as a result.
As a listener, too, it probably gives you a minute to kind of catch up on what you just heard and kind of absorb it a little bit more.
Absolutely. Whether it's a lead melody line or a riff or anything, you want to try to convey a story of some kind. And if you're just, it's a big run-on sentence where there's never anything, then you want to try to create things that people could remember. One of the coolest things, I think, is when you go to see a band. It doesn't happen all the time, but when people are like, we'll use Hotel California as probably the most obvious example. You can go and you could sing the guitar solo,
right?
Or any Tom Petty and the Heartbreakers song. The guitar solos are as memorable as the melody lines of the vocals, and I think that's the coolest thing. If you could create a guitar part that's so iconic and catchy and hooky that people will sing it live as if it's a vocal.
Right. They're going, bing, 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 that type of stuff. But yeah. So why did you end up calling it Artificial Spice? This is such a fun name right off the bat. That's
a great question. The initial thought or answer is it was a joke from my buddy Mike in Philadelphia. We were recording and he was explaining to me, I was over his house. He just got this new espresso machine that he spent a bunch of money on. And he was telling me, like, I got this espresso machine and I realized that, if I saved this amount of money per week, per year, because he just moved to this new place and he was going to this cafe across the street and spending like $6, $7 a day getting shots of espresso. And I'm just like, I can't spend $40 a week getting espresso. If I do it this way, if I spend all this money on this espresso machine and just buy my own and make it, it'll be as good as that. And he's like, I was developing this artificial spite for this cafe, what was otherwise serving me, giving me great service. That's the initial, I'm like, that's the name of the EP. But on a deeper personal level, I think it's artificial spite is something that we all do on a daily basis. Microaggression, things of that sort. It also ties into what I call the Michael Jordan complex, which is, I'm a huge NBA fan, not a huge sports fan. I've kind of had an NBA renaissance, but I grew up watching Michael Jordan. He was one of my favorite athletes to watch. And if you watch The Last Dance, he talks about how, to beat his competitors, he would make things up in his mind to actually make him angry or fuel his competitive nature to go out and beat people. And, to apply that to something more relevant to my life, it's like, I don't look at music as something that's competitive in nature, but surviving doing it and the industry itself. Anyone who tells you that in general, the music industry is a friendly place where everyone's in it together and there to help you out, that's the biggest lie they could tell you. And like anyone else that does anything, for as many great advancements I've had in doing this, every one I've had 20 letdowns, 20, this agent, music venue, musician, not return an email, not return a call. Thankfully I haven't been like screwed over a lot, but I definitely have been. I've been burned in X number of ways. And I think that's par for the course, and you learn as you go. But, rather than have real spite towards the people that won't return my emails, I tend to just use that as fuel to work harder and to achieve whatever goals I'm trying to set out and to do this, because whether somebody wants to admit it or not, there is a competitive nature of just trying to make it and trying to get by and do this. And it's sometimes the competitiveness I feel like comes from just within yourself. I'm always competing against myself as far as things that any opportunity that arises. It's like it's just because it's something I haven't done before. I'm even that much more challenged in my mind to try to tackle it. And I think that the mood and attitude of the music is very much in that realm where it's like it's kind of like a lot of that is just like, again, I'm exhausting my headroom and skill set on fast riffs and stuff like that. And it's more of a thing that's just, you need fuel to keep yourself grounded and work towards your own goals. And you want to be better than you were, the past year and the year before. And if you could kind of harness, the inevitable frustration of trying to pursue any kind of art related career into a way that you could ultimately provide it as positive fuel to just work harder. That's what I'm promoting essentially, where it's okay to feel all those negative things and, jealousy and anger and frustration. Those are all, if you're not feeling those things when you're getting into it, when you're trying to work it all out, then you're probably not human. Those are all real things, and it's best to just feel them for a second. Don't repress those, because what does that result in? I mean, we've all seen it. It's just people that are bitter or have real animosity towards other people, where, on one side, yes, I'm out to try to be as successful as I can. But I also realize that, like I mentioned earlier, music doesn't owe me anything. It doesn't owe anybody anything. And just to have the privilege to do it at all is something that I remind myself every time that I play. And also that I don't necessarily like to think that anyone's paying too much of attention to what I'm doing, and that if I were to stop playing music, the world will keep turning. And so it goes for just about anyone else. And that's ultimately a positive thing, because you shouldn't take yourself so seriously. And again, the cover is me kayaking on a yellow river. And I'm just, and so in short, it's something along those lines that I guess I'm still trying to figure out, and people could interpret however they want. But I suppose that's the long-winded answer for the title, the EP title. There it is.
I'll put the artwork up on the screen there. Is that a Brian Langan piece?
Yes. So the photo is actually, that's a real photo of me that was taken every year. My friend Mark Thomas, who actually has done all the other artwork for all of my other albums. We go night kayaking once a year, and that was taken last summer when we were actually out on the water in the middle of the night. And I just thought it would be a great album cover, filtered through Brian. And that's exactly what it is.
Yep, exactly. The colors and everything.
Yeah.
I was like, oh yeah, that has to be him.
And those are two of my favorite artists. So it was really amazing to kind of have a collaboration without them even realizing it. And take a second to talk about Mark. He will be at the Jazz Cafe show. We'll have an art display, and he'll have some of his prints for sale. And I'm so excited for people to kind of experience that because I believe this is the first time he's done that. And he's an old friend of mine, and he did all the other artwork for my other albums, including the Dream Killer Suite, the Demon Guy, which I've had pressed to vinyl, and just really cool stuff that kind of serves the music to a certain extent. Where like I see one of his pieces, and I'm like, that needs to be the cover of this album, and then I'll write something based on that cover.
Oh, okay.
Or that piece of art will actually fuel a little bit the musical direction of whatever it is I'm working on.
Oh, that's really cool. So that's part of this whole show. So the doors, I thought I saw were at 8.
Yes.
So that you can check out kind of the art show beforehand.
Yeah. So yeah, we could transition to talking about the show for a second, because I definitely would like to get into that a little bit. But yeah, doors will be at 8:00, and basically the first hour will be reserved for folks to check out Mark's art station. John Kimock will play at 9, and I'll be playing a little bit with him as well. He's a great friend of mine, and we've played a lot over the years. And the whole vibe with this show is just kind of like a communal group of guys that we're all helping each other do this. Play each other's original music. It's a very challenging thing to do for anybody to put on any show.
Yeah.
So I'm going to play a little bit on some of his stuff. He's going to come up and play a little bit on a few of mine. And it's just, for me, it's so cool because all the years of playing the Jazz Cafes is the first time I've ever done anything like this. And it's a very curated group of people that are my friends, who I'm fans of and that I care about, and I'm big fans of their work. And to just kind of have it be a night of like handpicked, good friends with good art and music is it's kind of, I don't know what the word is. I don't know to say it was a special show. Like every show's special, but this one is particularly special for me just because I've never actually done this before, and all the songs I'm going to be playing, I've never performed live before.
Oh, that's
and
cool.
For the most part, at least. And again, it's a new territory for me, and I couldn't think of a better place to do it than the hometown show in Wilkes-Barre, at a place I've played. I essentially grew up playing at.
And John's stuff, I was watching some of his stuff online or whatever. It's kind of interesting. He's almost kind of a band leader from the drum perspective, which is pretty cool. So how did you meet him through just seeing him live, or how did that come about?
I've known John for probably 11 or 12 years now, and we lived in Vermont together. We when I was up there, and we played some music together up there, and we're both in Pennsylvania now, and we're playing more lately. And there were periods over the years where I played his music, he's played mine. We've worked on a lot of stuff together. We've played in different bands where we're backing a songwriter, different songwriters, and we've done like the whole full on improv thing. So we have just like a long history of working together and doing different projects together, playing all different kinds of gigs, some super important, some super meaningless, but we have a lot of mileage under our belts together. And one appreciation I have, doing this for over a decade, in a semi-professional sense, is you really get to appreciate when you hit the 10-year mark of playing with people. I see folks that have been playing together for 20 or 30 years. I get it. It's just like there's certain folks that I may have not seen or spoken to in years that I've played a lot with in my life, and I call them to come play some kind of gig, and it's like an old friend. You don't miss a note, and you just kind of hit it, and you have all those years of built up chemistry, and I have such a fond appreciation for that the older I get, and I'm thankful to have a good handful of folks that I have been playing with that long for.
So for this show, who's going to be on stage with you?
Right. Yeah. I haven't really mentioned anything about that on the web, not intentionally by any means. I just a lot of different bullet points to stay on top of with that.
Sure.
But it'll be me, of course, and Alex Duquette on bass, who I've played a lot with in recent years. He'll be playing with John as well. So he'll be doing the double duty.
Okay.
Dave Butler, drummer who played on most of my studio stuff. And Pat Finnerty will be playing second guitar.
Nice.
Which, him and I, we lived together and played a lot of guitar together. And there's very few folks that I was going to try to attempt to do it as just a trio, but I realized that I just needed that extra guitar in a lot of these songs. And, Pat and I we've been playing together for a while, and it's just tried to pick guys that I know pretty well, that know me pretty well, that is efficient when it comes to like, I need you to play this thing on this song at this way and this thing. Got it. Cool.
Yeah.
And, so it's the first time this configuration of people have played together, and, but it's all familiar faces to me, and it's all people I've played with a lot in my life. But it's a very unique feeling, it being my music. And because whenever I'm playing other people's music, there's some sort of filtration system as far as,
right.
I need to serve the song or this moment in some way, or of course I have room to be myself on stage, but now it's like there's no filter at all as far as like expressing myself or guitar tones and things of that sort, where it's like then I'm like, who am I? Leading up to the show, definitely fighting off like a existential meltdown of sorts of like, what is all this stuff?
Right.
And like, how is it gonna? Because I pretty much have like a 75 to 90 minute set worth of music prepared, and it's, I think one of the most intriguing parts of this for me at this point in my musical journey is to see if I could take all these things, the ballads we talked about, the heavier stuff, and build a set of music that it's all cohesive. And some of my favorite bands do that so beautifully. Radiohead, you go see them and they have these incredible piano ballads with these huge rock moments, and I love that so much. And even the David Bowie element of just like constantly reinventing oneself, that's a huge part of it for me. And it's much easier to do just when you're releasing music, but then when it comes to performing it live, I'm like, oh my God, this is a tall order. And it is a tall order. And again, it's why these shows are so important, because I have no desire to do any touring immediately with this stuff or in the near future, but just to do a show at a place I played at 1 million times is it's an incredible amount of work. And I'm really proud of this group of guys I have, and I'm proud of this music, and it'll be it's going to be fun to kind of just explore it and have minimal expectations and just like surrender to it and just see where it goes and where it takes me.
Well, with Pat there too, we'll be sure that none of those songs stink. Sure.
This will probably be one of the few instances in Pat's life where he'll be on stage without a microphone.
That's a good point. Yeah.
Which is really hilarious. But I'm like, I just need you to play guitar, Pat. Mm-hmm. Although he always makes a great MC, of course. Mm-hmm. But yeah, I think that'll be fun for him too. You're just the guitar player tonight. I don't think he's rarely that.
Right. So we'll get back into the show and whatever, and we'll tie that up in just a bit. But you said you've been based in Philly these days, and so tell us maybe about the music scene there, your experiences there. Is it similar to Northeast PA? Is it very different? Does it have its own distinctness? So what's your take on the Philly scene?
Tons of amazing players, tons of amazing bands, tons of amazing venues. It's different from my time spent in Vermont or here or elsewhere in Pennsylvania. One of the biggest differences is that in Vermont, I found myself doing a lot more collaborative kinds of gigs on a regular basis. If I wasn't touring, I could play 3 to 4 nights a week with, 3 to 4 different types of bands, and everyone was always out jamming with each other. There's a little bit less of that in Philly. I think in Philly, everyone just seems to play in a band or in a couple of bands, and those bands are rehearsing as a band, and which is awesome. And there's lots of shows showcasing that. But there's so many different worlds as far as the rock world, and there's the rock world. There's the Motown soul world. There's the electronic music world, and there's just a lot of different. You guys all good?
Yeah. I was asking if you'd like a pillow to sit on.
Oh, okay. I didn't know if the audio cut out or something.
Oh, you're good.
Cool.
Sorry about that.
That's all right. But yeah, all these different subsets of people and just so many great players, and a very strong sense of community there, which I love. The Philly go Birds, right? Go Birds.
Oh yeah, that's gonna be.
And you gotta go Birds.
Jason is looking on disapprovingly.
What was it the dude said?
About what?
Dude Lebowski. I hate the fucking Eagles, man.
I mean, full disclosure, I really don't watch any football.
He was
don't have
talking
any.
about the band.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Well, I have other opinions on that, which we don't need to get into. But yeah, I bottom line with Philly is there's a lot of great stuff going on. It's a little different than here or in my time in Vermont per se.
Yeah.
But again, it's not necessarily a place where I find myself playing every night of the week, which is okay.
Right. So, and you obviously collaborate with a lot of musicians, locally. Who are some of your favorites to perform with around here
In Northeast PA?
Yes.
Well, all these guys live all over the place, but obviously I kind of came out of the Jazz Cafe the same time that Cabinet got everything together, and
right.
A lot of those guys still live around here, and they're great friends of mine, and I absolutely love their whole business model. At this point, they're just kind of doing things their own way. They book their own shows. They don't have an agent or anything, and
it's really interesting what they're doing.
They're like a true indie band that's kind of forged this very unique following that I have a lot to thank them just for. I feel like they single-handedly have forged this community of music lovers in the area that extends all through Pennsylvania. They're the reason that I could take a drive into somewhere random in central Pennsylvania and play, and there'll be people with Cabinet shirts on that saw me play with them a couple times, and I love that. I'm humbled by that. But you got to give it to AJ Jump. I've played a million gigs with him, and he's one of my favorite drummers. Great songwriters in this area. I mean, Mike Miz obviously lives in Nashville now, but I grew up playing with him here, and Charles Severa, the first person to ever really call me up to play as, let me play in your band type of thing. And there's so many, there's countless. I mean, all the Southside Five guys, Roy and Ian and Nick Driscoll, one of the best musicians in the world. The talent here is just so deep, and it's so close to all these other big hubs in the country. You have Philly right down the road, and New York City and DC and Baltimore, and there's just so many incredible players here that I growing up here and playing with a lot, and I still play with a lot of these guys. I'm so thankful because as I travel and get to meet other folks, this area is no slouch at all. And in fact, one of the most talent-rich regions of musicians of anywhere I've traveled.
I was going to say, I think there really is something unique about the musicians from here and the sounds that they create from out of here. Is that your perspective as well, that they're doing something very different than what everybody else is out there?
Yeah, and you could even extend that to like Eastern Pennsylvania in general. I feel like there's just these little outlets of people, like players, and these little scenes that everything has to come from somewhere. I like to think of the early 90s Seattle scene where all these bands kind of blew up, but essentially they were all just kind of like similar to how I find myself at different points in my life, which is a bunch of guys living together and playing in the same bands together. And, the scene that comes from that is so awesome. And it's kind of the same around here, where I feel like me and the same 7 guys for a 10-year period probably played in like 14 different musical entities. And it's so awesome. Like I love that so much. I mean, again, go back to AJ Jump. Hope he's listening. Love you, man. My God, I can't even think of how many different songbooks we've played on stage together, or just completely, full on improvisational situations as well.
So let's get into a couple other kind of random little bits that we didn't touch on. With guitarists, I feel like there's a certain identity or thing that comes out of the make and model that you particularly play, or brand that maybe you endorses you, or you endorse them, or whatever. So what are you playing these days? And I mean that is a random guitar right over there that I thought would make an okay prop, but I wasn't sure what you're playing these days. So
I'm always happy to talk gear. This is easy. So I don't have as much gear as other people. Usually most purchases I make are pretty calculated, because if I'm going to buy a guitar or something to perform with, I generally, it's an investment. I try to get something that I'll hang on to. And I'm past the point of trying to sell anything. Everything I have, I just keep.
Okay.
But I really have like 2 to 3 main working guitars that I use on a regular basis. Most people are probably familiar with a couple of Fender Telecasters that I use. I have a yellow one that I've had for 11 or 12 years. I've replaced every part on it except the actual body itself. I was drawn to Telecasters because of their durability and versatility, which is the main reason I still use them. I also really love the technique of playing that instrument specifically, which is conducive to, country style guitar and Chet Atkins type, finger picking type of guitar. I really love all that. So for performance, I typically use that, especially with touring, because they hold up really well on the road. And if they get beat up, or if I have to fly with one, it's really easy to put it in the overhead. I do most of my recording with my Fender Jazzmaster that I've had since I was 17 or 18. And I still have that guitar. So I mostly use Fender or Fender style guitars. And I think, again, just the durability and versatility is what keeps me coming back to them. I have a few other guitars that I use for recording, or maybe here and there. But it's a lot of energy to keep more than a couple guitars maintained throughout the year, especially if I'm traveling with them. Usually once or twice a year, I have to get them set up, as far as, dealt with the humidity and moisture and things of that sort. And so there's just a fewer things I need to worry about, the better. And I also really like, that there's some of my favorite guitar players are guys that have essentially used the same guitar their whole career. Johnny Greenwood from Radiohead uses that same Telecaster, and we were talking about Radiohead, so that was the first one that comes to mind. And there's plenty of others, I'm sure.
Yeah.
But you get to know the instrument, you get to know your limitations on it, what you can and can't do. Especially with practicing, it's like if you practice certain techniques, bending, things of that sort, it's going to feel different on one guitar versus another guitar. And if you're going to practice different kinds of musical vocabulary, I almost need to do it on every single guitar that I'm going to be performing with, because it's going to be a little different. So definitely, my Telecasters are my workhorses that I don't see why I won't continue to use those for, if I never purchase another guitar again, I'm completely content with the instruments I have had for a long time now that I've grown to really love, and I don't even get to play them as much as I'd like.
Is that when you're obviously you're touring with a lot of different musicians, and you're kind of having to adapt to what they do? Are you just bringing those guitars along and making that work, or are you using maybe stuff that they would want you to use? Or
no one typically has a problem with the Telecaster, and it's because you could kind of make it sound like pretty much any guitar.
Yeah.
And if I have to bring, I really like just bringing for most shows I play, just one guitar. when you add more things into the equation, it just takes away from sometimes I just need to have a streamlined process. So
Right.
just having one guitar opens up a little bit more of my much needed mental real estate. I did that Lumineers tour last summer, and like playing arenas and stuff. I'm going to bring a bunch of stuff. And of course, we played first. So we were at the the front of the stage where like the end of the stage is here and we're here. And even I tried to mess around with having a couple guitars. And after the first couple nights, I'm like, just got to bring the telly out, walk out like Beatles style, walk out with it. And it's going to get the job done. I have no time to take the thing off and put, all that. So yeah, very partial to just usually having one guitar out with me, and just if it's going to be one guitar, it's more than likely going to be the Telecaster.
So you recently went on tour with Grahame Lesh, is that right?
Yeah.
So how did that go? What was that experience like?
That was really just a weekend of shows, and that was a pretty unique and great experience because I've played with Grahame before in Midnight North, and Nate, the drummer, is a buddy of mine who is also on those gigs. He plays in Midnight North, and I got to play with two new folks that I've never played with before, and very comfortable group of guys and a comfortable songbook that Grahame kind of chose a batch of songs, some of his own, some stuff, some of his dad's songs, Grateful Dead songs, but some obscure songs that he like wrote with his dad, or one of his brothers wrote with his dad, that is kind of like, more of like in the outer edges of the Grateful Dead songbook vault that only a few people would probably even really be familiar with. And it was just, and he knows those songs so well, and I don't really play a ton of Grateful Dead music at this point. When I lived in Vermont, that was one of my main gigs, is I did the Dead Set Tuesdays at Nectar's. That's how I learned a lot of that stuff. But playing it with him specifically it's different because it's in his DNA.
Right.
So it's he knows that stuff really well, and it's just he's super comfortable and expressive with it. And we played Jay Peak, Vermont. It's cold as hell up there, and then we played Levon's Helm Studios, which is my third time playing there, and just an absolute privilege to play at a place like that. Again, goes back to earlier. It's always the artificial spite discussion. It's like you're always slightly conflicted. You always want more. You always want to see yourself here, but you want to be here, and you're driven to improve. But at the end of the day, I play a place like Levon's Barn. I'm like, if I never play another show again, this is the last place I ever play. I'm like, I am beyond content and so thankful. It's so amazing, the energy in a place like that.
Well, I mean, you've worked with some really big names, and I'm sure the question you probably get is like, oh, what's the biggest gig in your mind? But maybe it's something more like that, and not necessarily like size or arena. Am I right in saying that?
Absolutely. In fact, the smaller shows with the seated crowds are the most challenging shows to play to. On the Lumineers tour, we did about 20 to 25 arenas, and after the first couple of nights when the lights would go out, essentially you'd see the people right in the front, and you wouldn't really be able to see anything else.
Right.
And that was obviously an incredible opportunity that, I still am like processing. And if I never get to do anything like that again, I'm like, I feel extremely thankful and fulfilled to have even one opportunity to have a go around with that. But the size doesn't necessarily equate to the quality of the experience. On the surface level, my job is the same as far as I'm got to lock in with these dudes on stage, and we got to perform these songs well, and got to vibe out with each other and connect in that way.
Yeah.
But obviously at the smaller place, when you have the audience right there, you so much of it is just feeling the energy of the crowd. And perhaps at some of the larger shows, you lose that a little bit, where
right.
I feel like there is a sweet spot. And the Jazz Cafe is a perfect size if that place has a good amount of people in there where you could really feed off that energy. The anywhere from 200 to 500 person sized rooms I really like to play, because you could kind of see everyone, and it's and you could really connect with people, and that's important.
Going through, just your bio and some of the names, Bob Weir, Larry Campbell, Jim Lauderdale, Steve Earle, Oteil Burbridge, Steve Kimock, played Firefly, Lock-In, Peach Fest. What's like kind of a gig that sticks out in your mind, or is one that like kind of goes to the top of the list for you in terms of maybe a good personal experience for you as a musician?
I mean, it's hard not to say, it's hard not to immediately jump to the Lumineers tour, because that was like nothing else I've ever done, and it was most recent, and that was a very like, when that came together, which was semi last minute, I had to put a lot of energy towards just getting my setup together to be able to play places like that. And I was also playing this long 2-month tour with guys I've never met before, and we had no choice but to lock in with each other and go out, and like there's no other option other than to go out there and perform well in those kind of environments.
Yeah.
And just the immediate camaraderie and chemistry that we needed to create for each other was like nothing I've ever experienced. And it was just, I learned so much in such a short period of time. And, we were chasing tour buses in our van, and we had these long drives, and obviously, I mean, I got to play Coors Field, which is a, baseball stadium. And
yeah, that's great.
That was just like unreal. I still don't have the words for it. And I, there's always there's always things going on back at home or elsewhere in life that could weigh you down mentally, and being out for 2 months is not easy. But I tried it I really just made it a point to myself to let the rest of your life go and just enjoy this for what it is for these 2 months. And that's essentially what we did. And it was like we got shot into orbit, then we were just on the tour orbit for 2 months, and it was really incredible. And that was a huge, after that, I needed some time last fall to kind of just be home and recover and figure out what's next. And I'm still basically doing that. I have some touring with Daniel Rodriguez this spring. It'll all be out west. And then I have, a few things coming in for the summer, but I just basically, again, just want to get there and see what presents itself and see what kind of projects I want to get into. And it's not really sensible to look too far into the future doing this, because as we learned a few years ago, it could be taken away. Yeah, and things could change on such a drastic moment. It's better to try to just live in the moment. And that's what I think I was able to actually successfully do on the Lumineers tour.
And not everybody's really built for that kind of lifestyle of being on the road for like months at a time or whatever. So like, it seems like something that you seem to enjoy. What are maybe, for those who haven't done it yet, I know we have a lot of musicians that watch the show and listen to the show. And, what would you say are maybe some of the things that have made your life easier, things you learned on the road, or like, okay, I can do this next time. And, life's a little bit, better because of that on the road.
Yeah. I mean, we could do a whole podcast on this.
Yeah.
But in short, touring in your 30s is different than touring in your 20s. And just, you're striving for consistency every day in terms of trying to feel the same. And there's pretty much everything. There's so many challenges that go out your way to make you not feel comfortable just to get up and do your perform.
Yeah.
Long drives, traffic, didn't get a chance to eat, whatever. But I've at this point in my life, it's one of the few things that I know how to do. I know how to get in the van or whatever with people and get to the show and be able to compartmentalize whatever challenges the day has presented to go out and perform. And the last few years I've gotten really back into long distance running, and that was kind of my initial vice that I had in the early stages of the pandemic. I was pretty competitive when I was younger. So if we got a roll on the earlier side, I'm always getting up and running beforehand. And that's kind of like, and at times on the road, I'd be taking it a little too far. I sometimes get up and run 8 to 10 miles, and then I get in the van and try to go play a show later.
Right.
But honestly, that is a grounding force as far as keeping my whole mind and body balanced out. Cause you get to any of the negative stuff up here, you needed some time to defrag that and just
right.
get it out of your system in a constructive way so that you could put your energy towards, helping everyone and performing well, and just being even if you're having a tough day or you're struggling, if you just don't convey that and just try to compartmentalize it and just be positive, that goes such a long way. And it's something I've learned, over the years. You want to support and help the people you're with. And thankfully, everyone I share the road with these days, everyone's all on the same page as far as that goes. And it's understanding people's boundaries and understanding your own boundaries. And sometimes it just got to go sometimes a 5-minute walk goes a long way. But thankfully, again, everyone I've been on the road with is just very conscious of all that. So it's always pretty easy. Even on that 2-month tour, it was, we were very tired by the end of it.
I'm sure
we had some long drives, but, there was no other way for us to complete that, not just the performance side of it, but also just getting from the next place to the next place, unless we all had to hold each other up, essentially.
Yeah. It
was funny. Daniel would sing a song with the Lumineers every night, and tour buses routing for tours is, you get on your bus and you wake up and you're at the next place. We did not have that luxury. We didn't mind, but he would sing a song with the Lumineers and we'd be in the loading dock. He'd have the van all loaded up and I'd be in the driver's seat with the van on, the trailer and everything. And he would walk off the arena stage, be clapping, and he would just literally walk straight off the stage, hand the person their guitar. We get into the van and start driving immediately.
Wow.
Because we have 8 hours. So we got to put down 3 hours tonight, 5 hours tomorrow. And every second, if it's 9 or 10 o'clock at that point, it's every second we get in the car and go is important.
Right.
So it was just a really funny way to do it. I would not have it any other way.
Shatters a bit of that rock star sort of thing that people think of, it's very glamorous. And
at least being the opening band, but
right.
To do that type of tour in that way, there was something about it that was really special. And because we would have to rally every day and just be don't care if we drove 8 hours and we got here late and we missed lunch and we have 20, we had no sound check because the production was running late. Let's do this, and we would always rally and find the energy and the spirit. Because again, there's no other option when you're at that size gig to not do pretty much a perfect job or as close to it as possible.
Right, of course. So is it feel good to to kind of wrap things up and bring it home? Literally, is it great to be back in the area again to prepare for this show next week?
I mean, I couldn't have. I'm thankful that I've chosen Wilkes-Barre and Philly to give my best to, and to the energy basically that's gone into these shows has occupied a lot of the winter months for me. I had some sessions and gigs and things in January, but really this whole month, I mean, I'm putting forth a lot of effort for these 2 shows. And then after that, I kind of put this whole thing, I wanted to get this EP out. And I wanted to play these shows before I hit the road this spring, because I know I won't have much of an opportunity, especially getting the guys that I wanted to play with together and, locking all that in. It's increasingly challenging when you don't have a steady band, and I'm just kind of assembling this unit for the one weekend.
Right.
So I'm to me, it was, again, the artificial spike complex. I'm all right. I mean, the gigs are booked. The guys are in. There's no other option now. I have to make this as great as possible, even if it's a little nerve-wracking and scary as far as performing my own music, which it is. It's a vulnerable thing, and to be on the other side of it I find it to be very beneficial, even though I haven't even played the shows yet, just because it allows me to understand when I'm on the other side of it, the amount of pressure or what could be going on in the band leader's mind when my job is simply to play guitar. And it's always good to understand everybody a little bit better. And I'm definitely learning a lot through this process. And that's kind of the whole point, right? If again, it's the artificial spike kind of complex is if you're competing against yourself, there's things to be learned, there's things to improve upon. And I mean, you could direct your frustration with that at others, but if you could harness that into, self-improvement, that's kind of as hard as it can be sometimes, that's what I live by.
So guitarist Justin Mazer will perform at the River Street Jazz Cafe in Plains on Saturday, February 18th, with an opening set by drummer John Morgan Kimock at 9 p.m. Tickets are on sale now at the riverstreetjazzcafe.com. So please go and get your tickets early, save some money at the door. And anything else you want to throw in about this before we get out of here?
I think we covered everything, and it's always great to chat with you. And I just love the format of these things, and it's great to have an open-ended conversation about a variety of things.
Yeah, I think we covered quite a bit tonight. So I appreciate your time, and thanks for hanging out with us.
My pleasure.
All right, we will see you here next Wednesday. And we started on time today. In fact, we were a couple minutes early. Okay, so I think we should get some extra likes, hearts, whatever you want to do in the comments below. Yes, especially with Jason here, you should definitely give him some extra. He needs it, really. I mean, that's
my fault. We got on time.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, that was a big part of it. So if you want to see us on time more, I guess give us those extra, social media likes. We're usually on punk time here.
We had the soft 6:58 start.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, that's very rare for around here, but we appreciate you tuning in. So if you like the show, you like the conversation, please share it. Please let other people know about it. And give us those social media reactions so we can get further and further into your feed and put some good stuff out there, some cool stuff going on in the area, instead of the same old stuff. Especially the last couple of days, everybody talking about the Grammys and stuff and all the. If I see one more thing about that, like, who cares? I really, at the end of the day, who cares? This does not really affect any of us.
It starts at your local. It starts at your local scene and your local community.
Exactly. I feel like that's what we should be. That's what we should be talking about. So, again, thanks for tuning in, and we will see you here next Wednesday. And have a good night, everybody.